Well, welcome back to Wednesday Night Live. It is November 19th, 2014, and we're coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley, the gateway to the great Northwest. We're glad you could join us. I am your award-winning host, Ralph Lillig, and we're going to be kind of getting caught up tonight. I'm sorry I missed you last week. Strange things happen now and then. Last week I had a television fall on me, and it's not as funny as it sounds, or maybe it is as funny as it sounds, but I really wasn't up, so we had a rerun, and I apologize for that. Try to keep the reruns to a minimum. Now, you're going to be seeing some reruns this season because we're coming up on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and well, that's just what happens in, I guess you'd call it the off season. But at any rate, we are live as we ever are tonight, and we're glad you joined us. As we do every week at this time, I want to start off and tell you a little bit about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478 Hope. I asked Janet, the director over there the other day, I said, Janet, you know, I don't think I've ever really got a mission statement from you folks. I know what their mission is, but I had never asked for a mission statement, and she was gracious enough to send me the mission statement for Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, and here it is, and this says it better than I could ever say it. Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center is a Christ-centered, nonprofit ministry offering life-affirming alternatives to abortion and a compassionate care to those who face pregnancy and abortion-related issues. And that covers it better than I could hope to. In other words, as I've said so many times, they're the antithesis of everything Planned Parenthood. They are all about life, showing compassion for the pregnant mothers and giving them hope for the yet unborn child. But as I've also told you many times, they operate on a very small budget. They are on a shoestring. They don't get the millions of tax dollars every year, or billions actually, like Planned Parenthood, so they could use your help. As I've also told you, the area code for the entire state of Idaho is 208. So if you would call Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center at 478 HOPE and see what you can do to help them. They could certainly use financial help. You may find some other way that you can help. You can help an expectant mother and the as yet unborn child come into this world with compassion and hope. And I have no doubt that God will bless you for that. All right. As I said, we're going to get caught up on some of the news. Now, last week, well, in the rerun, we more or less covered the election. I'm going to do it a little bit more, get into a little bit more on that. Not in heavy detail, but I thought it was an interesting election, if for no other reason but that it was such a massive win for the Republican Party. Now, as I've shared with you before, I'm not into this tribal thing where I'm going to vote just because they have an R after their name. As a matter of fact, I also shared with you that this election cycle, I did something I've never done before. I actually crossed party lines. Pardon me, and I probably did that as much as a complaint against the Republican Party as I did because I thought the candidates were good candidates. As simple as that. So let's quickly, we'll go back in the Wayback Machine 2 weeks ago to November 5th, and this is in the Idaho State Journal, and it's out of Pocatello, of course. Ken Andrus, Republican of Lava Hot Springs, easily won re-election to the Idaho House on Tuesday, downing his Democratic opponent from American Falls, Curtis Workman, by more than a 2-to-1 margin in the District 28 race. Workman, who is an American Falls city councilman, lost the vote in Power County, his home county. In Bannock County, Andrus won with 7,197 votes to 3,777. So it's a 65.5 to 34.4% for Andrus. Andrus says, it's been a real pleasure to experience the process and get to know the people of Workman said this. District 28, Workman said, I still have a lot of fun projects to work on in the city of American Falls. Andrus has served in the Idaho House since winning his first election in the legislature 2004. He won close elections against Democrat Alan Anderson in both 2004 and 2006 and beat Anderson more handily in the 2008 election. Andrus easily defeated his Democratic opponents in 2010 and 2012. He is currently chairman of the House Agricultural Affairs Committee and a member of the Resources and Conservation and State Affairs Committees. So, and as you know, Representative Andrus is a rancher. He has quite a spread. He and his, I think it's he and his brother running sheep and cattle, and agriculture is the perfect place for him. So that's that. Now, also on November 5th, an article by Sarah Glenn for the Journal. Pocatello area schools, county offices, senior centers, malls, and even private businesses were humming Tuesday with democracy in action. Voter turnout this year in Bannock County was on par with expectations, said Julie Hancock, Bannock County Elections Administrator. As the first Bannock ballots started making their way through the counting machines at 8 p.m., election officials estimated that about 55% of the county's 40,000 registered voters cast a ballot. Now that's pretty good in an off year. That number included not only those who voted on Election Day, but also early voters and absentee ballots. All are counted at the same time. And quoting here, "It's hard to know before every vote is cast, but we're expecting a good turnout for this election," Hancock said. "People are deciding that they care, that they want to be part of the process." When compared to national numbers, Hancock's expectations turned out to be correct. Bannock County can boast that it had higher voter turnout than the national average. Data from the Pew Research Center says that voter turnout in a midterm election hovers around 41% at its best. During the last comparable midterm election in 2010, national voter turnout was 37%. Statewide in Idaho, Secretary of State Ben Isursa, former Secretary of State, predicts 58% of Idaho's registered voters will turn out in Tuesday's general election, a far cry from the 74% that turned out in 2012. Nanette Smith, who has worked as a precinct judge for 32 years, described Tuesday's turnout as light but steady. From her Precinct 28 table at the Bengal Creek Apartments, she surveyed the steady flow of mostly college students who weren't even born when she started working that precinct's elections. "This is very light," she said, of the morning's crowd. By noon, about 80 of the precinct's 900 registered voters had cast a ballot. By that time, about 18 students had registered to vote at the precinct, a far cry from the 286 people who registered during the last presidential election. Other poll workers across Pocatello also described the voter turnout as slow but steady. From her table at Holt Arena, poll worker Sharon Campbell was bracing for the 5 p.m. rush. "After work, it kicks up a bit," said Campbell, who has manned the Election Day table with the same group of poll workers in Precinct 32 for 6 years. This is about average for a non-presidential election. One major difference this year has been an increase in the number of people voting early. Even before Election Day dawned, Bannock County had 2,000 more people vote early than did in the last midterm election in 2010. And that early voting is going to be important here in a minute, not in this article, you'll see. According to Hancock, 2,500 more early voters cast their ballots this time around than in the most recent primary election. Early voting in Bannock County started September 22nd and gathered about 4,500 votes. In May, voter turnout in Pocatello reached an unusual high. About 55% of registered voters cast a ballot then. However, this was mostly due to a few hot-button issues on voters' minds, including an issue that addressed equal workplace rights for homosexuals. During the primary election, we were done at 2:30 a.m., said Bannock County Clerk Robert Pilecki. We're hoping for 11:30 p.m. this time round. And those of you who voted or were here then, you know that the hot button issue was the Proposition A or 1 or whatever it was, the so-called non-discrimination ordinance, which I will remind you that, and I've said this before and I reiterate, the original vote on that, the Fair Pocatello people, interesting name for them, the Fair Pocatello people were victorious by 147 votes. That's significant because they spent $156,000 to win to keep the non-discrimination ordinance, so-called. By 2 o'clock the next morning, that had dropped from 147 to 80. That should set off warning bells with somebody. When we paid for the recount, we had the recount using the same ballots, the same machines, the same people, the same technique. It dropped from 80 to 56. The Secretary of State signed the affidavit that there were only 56 votes difference for keeping the so-called non-discrimination ordinance in place. That should tell us volumes about what happens and what potentially happened here. With students voting, absentee voting, early voting, there's so many places for mishap that, well, you'll see. We have another article that covers that eventually. We as voters must be on the alert. We must be watching. We must keep an eye on the county clerk's office and especially the elections division. And I'm not pointing fingers at the people who work there. So it's not intended that way. But it is obvious from what I've just shared with you that there is a serious problem. And I don't know what, I have my suspicions about some of it. I have in the past recommended some security items that the county commissioners were going to do, they've never done, that the county clerk said he would do, and then he retired. And they put in Mr. Pilecki. So he had been there for about a year, roughly, before this election, gave him a good chance to get his feet on the ground. I'm hoping that Mr. Pilecki will take a very serious look at the process and find out what we can do to make it more secure, and give us a little more trust in the system. You know, with what's going on nationally, and if you watch the news even a little bit, the Obama administration is falling apart. It's like somebody kicked the Tinker Toys and it's all falling to the ground. And we are learning firsthand from Obama himself, as well as from his Pelosi's and Reeds and this fellow, that Gruber. They have been telling us how Gruber told us how he lied, how he encouraged the administration to lie about the Obamacare, and the things they hid so that we wouldn't see them because they knew that if we saw them, we would reject them. So here we are 6 years into this administration, and the wheels are coming off that train, and it has been a juggernaut rolling over everything. And now our head of state, the President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, is about to announce that he is going to unilaterally, with a stroke of a pen, he loves to talk about how he can sign things and use the phone, he is going to unilaterally grant what amounts to a form of excusing some 5 million undocumented, or as we often call them, illegal aliens, because he wants to, because it furthers his personal agenda. This is a man who is so filled with hubris and so dead set on his socialist agenda that even in the face of his own party complaining about it, he's going to sign this undocumented thing and give them legal status. Well, we can go on and we will, but this gives you some indication of why I'm going through already plowed ground here, because this is what's happening around us right now, folks. All right, continuing November 5th. November 5th was busy in the Idaho State Journal. With only 59 votes separating winning Democratic challenger Jared Stein from incumbent Republican Bannock County Assessor David Packer, a recount is possible. Now, you know by now that there was no recount. It still could happen. I think there's a 180-day window there where Packer could ask for a recount, but it would be very expensive, because I know the recount that we had for the Proposition A, or what it was, that was $100 a precinct, and I think we did 19 or 20 precincts, something like that. But that was only in the city. The assessor's office would be for the entire county. That would be pretty costly. But I continue. The final vote tally, with all 60 precincts reporting Tuesday night, was 10,959 for Stein and 10,900 for Packer. With 21,859 votes cast and a victory margin 0.25 of 1% of the voter total, Packer can request a recount, but he would have to pay for that. So it would be $6,000, and I'm not sure, and then there are filing fees and some other things. Idaho code states that any candidate who loses a race by less than 0.1% can request an automatic recount from the Idaho Attorney General, and the state will pay for that recount. I think there will be a recount, Stein said Tuesday night, but I'm so excited. This is great. Packer could not be reached to confirm whether or not he'll seek a recount in the election. Stein based much of his campaign on an allegation that Packer is using his public office for personal gain. Since being elected assessor in 2010, Packer has maintained his license as a real estate broker and continues to co-own several rental properties in Pocatello. And he co-owns some of those with City Councilman Johnston. That was in the paper also. Packer has stated he doesn't do the appraisals on commercial property himself and that process is done by the county's commercial appraiser. He also said the race should have focused on the improvements he's made in the assessor's office since taking over in 2011. Incumbent Democratic Bannock County Clerk Robert Pilecki won Tuesday night's election over Republican challenger Dave Bowen, 11,776 votes to 10,088, giving Pilecki 53.8% of the vote. Pilecki was unanimously appointed to the position of county clerk by the Bannock County Commissioners last January after the retirement of Dale Hatch. Now, it's interesting. Nobody has ever spoken to you about this, so I'll tell you about it. They're talking about Packer conducting personal business on company time. We'll just read this very liberally, and we'll say, well, at least he was at work. And I'm not trying to be cute here, but I want to make a point. Dale Hatch was rarely at work. I don't know where he was, but he was rarely in his office, rarely in the building. Pilecki, to the best of my knowledge, is at work every day, just like we pay him to be. So, I mean, if you want to just make a little contrast, Hatch, he just sailed through his term, got reelected with a lot of help from the Republican commissioners and some other people, which is interesting because Hatch is a Democrat, but they wanted him in there for you can decide what reasons. And then they put Pilecki in there. Pilecki at least had some background. Hatch had no background. He had no business being in that office, except that some people wanted him there for whatever reasons. You draw your own conclusions. And I don't mean this as a thumb in Hatch's eye. He's a nice guy. He certainly had no business being in that office, but he's a nice guy. But he's gone. Pilecki is in there. Pilecki at least has some training, and he's been in the county offices for a while. Educated man, young man. And so we're hoping for the best. We're hoping that he's a Democrat, but he was appointed by the Republicans. Now, in case you don't know, since Hatch was a Democrat, the requirement is that he had to be replaced by a Democrat. So it's not like they went out and looked for a Democrat against a Republican. The commissioners had no choice. They had to put a Democrat in there. I don't know who the candidates were, but Pilecki got the job. And as far as I can see, at least he has the bona fides for the job. Pilecki had served 2 years as the Director of Indigent Services in Bannock County. He was responsible for managing the primary election in May and dealing with the challenge to the outcome concerning the vote retaining the city's Pocatello's anti-discrimination ordinance. Everybody assumed, I guess, that because we were on opposite sides of the table and because he's the boss on the election process, they assumed that, I guess they were enemies. I'm a conservative Republican. I'm assuming since he's a Democrat that he's at least liberal. I don't know. I have nothing against Mr. Pilecki. I voted for him. And I voted for him because I thought he was the only candidate really that had any business running for that office. I don't care if he had been appointed. He had at least a year in the office and he had the background. So I had no bone to pick with him. When we were dealing with each other across the table, he was strictly business, as he should be. He's the county clerk. I would expect him to be. But at any rate, then it goes on to say that Bowen is a retired masonry contractor who was a referee for high school basketball for 32 years and a longtime volunteer at the Simplot Games. He ran unsuccessfully for the Idaho legislature two years ago. Bowen, here again, many people think that he's a really nice guy. I don't dispute that, but that is not a qualification for being a county clerk. A masonry contractor, I have the greatest respect for anybody who works with their hands and has a skill. I don't have a skill. I was in law enforcement all those years. I guess that's a skill, but it's not. I admire carpenters and plumbers and masons and people who build things. Farmers, I really admire that. But those aren't necessarily qualifications for the job. All right, going on, County Commission. In a relatively close race for Bannock County Commission, District 1 incumbent Republican Carl Anderson defeated Democrat challenger Tamara Code, 11,704 votes to 10,276. Anderson has been a commissioner since 2010. It was wonderful, Anderson said about his Tuesday re-election. I had a lot of people backing us up. The incumbent also sang praises about his opponent. My opponent did a really good job and she was a formidable person to run against, Anderson said. Code says she was thankful for all the support she received during the campaign. However, I'm still concerned about the deficit spending in Bannock County, and I hope the commissioners spend more time looking out for the residents of southern Bannock County. In uncontested races, Bannock County Treasurer Radine Barker, a Democrat, and Republican County Commissioner for District 2, Steve Hadley, both were re-elected to office. And I haven't seen the stats on how the votes went if they obviously each got 100%, but I don't know 100% of what. I don't know. I have a raised eyebrow about this because Kelly Packer ran unopposed. Of course, she got 100% of the vote, but it was several hundred fewer than she might have got. In other words, a lot of people didn't vote for her. They just left it blank, as I did. Jim Guthrie, same thing. They did not get 100% of that 100%. They got 100% of whatever was cast. But there were a lot of people stayed home on those two. So I don't know how that worked out there, but so much for that. All right, November 6th. Lost and found votes don't change assessor's race. Now this is interesting, and I'll give you a reason why. The candidates for Bannock County Assessor got an unexpected phone call Wednesday morning that gave one renewed hope and the other some unexpected stress. The call was from the Bannock County Clerk's office regarding the discovery of about 100 previously uncounted votes cast on Election Day. Excuse me. Let me read that. The discovery of about 100 previously uncounted votes on Election Day. Because only 59 votes separated the apparent winner of the assessor's race, Democrat Jared Stein, from Republican incumbent Dave Packer, it was possible the 100 uncounted votes could affect the election's outcome. No other Bannock County race was so close. Stein, Packer, and the local media were asked to be at the office of County Clerk Robert Pilecki at noon Wednesday for the counting of the 100 votes. About 30 minutes later, after the votes had been tallied and a vote counting machine set up in Pilecki's office, it was announced that Stein was still the winner. In fact, his margin of victory grew to 95 votes, 11,026 total for the Democrat compared to Packer's 10,931. After Pilecki announced the new totals in his office, crowded with reporters, election workers, and Democrat and Republican Party officials, Packer said, "Welcome to the assessor's office," to Stein before shaking his hand. Pardon me, I apologize. It does not appear that Packer will pursue any sort of a recount in the race. He has been the assessor for one term, taking office in 2011. Pilecki said the 100 votes were left uncounted on election night after they were set aside and forgotten by election workers. Now think about that for a minute. Election workers set 100 ballots aside and forgot about them. The votes came from individuals who had cast ballots at the courthouse. Pilecki said the uncounted votes were discovered by his staff Wednesday morning, prompting him to hold a press conference. County officials said a similar incident involving uncounted votes occurred in Bannock County about 15 years ago. Well, actually, that was about 5 years ago. Stein said he felt confident the uncounted votes would not change the outcome of his race, though he admitted getting the call from county office Wednesday morning was stressful. It's been a roller coaster ride, Stein said. Now, I point this out to you because we had the same thing happen 4 or 5 years ago, where 25 votes just magically appeared. A can somehow got set aside with 25 unopened ballots. They were mail-in or early, whatever it was. And lo and behold, the commissioners had a meeting. A number of us were there to watch this, and in came Tori. I always forget Tori's last name, who used to work in the elections office. Tori came in with a can with mysteriously 25 votes in it. Somehow the can had been missed, and here we are, deja vu all over again. There's something very seriously wrong down there. One of the things that I think might help. I apologize. I'm sorry that my lungs have just kind of dried out in here. My wife actually had an idea that I think is a very good one. It's a relatively simple and straightforward safety check, if you will, and simply put a number on each can. Now each can is sealed. It's got one of those little lead squeeze-on seals that's supposed to be, you can't break it. Well, they all look alike. It's not a real safety net. But if you were to count and put a big number on each one of these cans for each precinct, and had somebody that had to look at that number and put it against their sheet, and somebody maybe looking over the shoulder, That number, if you made it big enough, would certainly be obvious enough that somebody's going to be keeping track of that. That may or may not help with this. The point is that there's something seriously flawed in the elections office, and this is just one more nail in the coffin, if you will, to a system that already has various serious flaws, as I indicated about Proposition A, going from 147 to 56. Something seriously wrong with that. So when votes and cans that have votes in them just mysteriously appear, all of us should be concerned, not just Ralph Lillig, arch-conservative, or however you want to vote, all of us who are affected by the election process. Ron Doherty doesn't write a lot for the newspaper. He's kind of sporadic, but when he writes, he usually has something interesting to hear. And November 6th, here again, another very busy day. November 6th was no different. He had something to say. And this one has to do with the levy. We haven't heard much about the levy yet. Unlike in the years past, the school district has not been beating the drum vigorously for the levy yet. But then it's not due for another year, I guess. Titled November 6th in the Idaho State Journal, "How High is the Levy, Mama?" Here we go round the mulberry bush again and again. Simple minds creating simple debt by simple illusions of desire, all blessed by a simple majority next March 2015 with simple trickery played upon the citizenry. A constantly repetitive local simple story. Those mysterious wonders of abusive mathematics. Remember back to the first of the year? It's all for taxpayer savings, persuaded Pocatello School District Director of Business Bart Reed. Last April, District 25 refinanced about $4.2 million in bond debt with the help of the state to lessen the property tax assessment for the bond portion of the district budget. Follow the money or lack of it with the state help troubles me, and should readers as well, deep into our bones and billfolds. What did that help entail? The proposed transaction saves taxpayers $180,000 in interest payments only. The entire business deal is interesting in itself. Taxpayers agree to secure bond dollars, pay variably changing interest rates as well, and often for years to come. What a Ponzi scheme. Oh, and no word about what the interest rate was for the refi. In summary, if true, given a savings of $180,000 for business and property owners, each taxpayer might save maybe $2.75, if we're lucky. Whoopee! Recent community utility increases in food costs took that savings and more. But it's the district thought that counts, or does it? Back in April 1st, in April, I responded with a prediction. In 2016 and beyond, taxpayers will end up with more elusive debt from our carrying school district. And I must say, folks, come on, placing bonds, any kind of bond, into buyer markets right now is a pitiful financial move in itself. Feds aren't even having luck with bond issues. Directors of school businesses should stay out of money market worlds. They do not know enough to benefit from them. They, in fact, become controlled by them. Directors, please stay within school budget issues, and you'll have enough madness with which to keep yourselves busy. Yet, nevertheless, Pocatello School District looks at new tax levy appears with a researched, informative journal article by Michael O'Donnell, Wednesday, October 15th. It brought on visions of flowers and smiling faces when last April trustee Dave Matson observed, "You're just being a good steward for the community," which may have been an underlying question instead. Reed's reply, "I think the public needs to see we're being as responsible as we can." Oh, boy, you could do millions for that line. In view of district financial history during simply the last 15 years, are you truly serious? Study district dollars history. Still, raise your hands, people, and come to the head of the class if you sincerely believe that 2013-14 school debt will be, in fact, paid off as predicted. What about all the other long-term debts? District response? We just try to hang on to what we have. That's also what the public's been trying to do since 1984. Again, as I've suggested numerous times, district problems don't concern money at all. It's simply deficient leadership blaming the state for woes. Indeed, common threads within halls of education, there are continuously more questions than answers, more hypotheses than fact, and more wishful dreams than nonfiction. When all the latest smoke blows out, how many citizens think another bond issues will be appearing on the horizon endlessly? Investigate. Hold on to wallets also, folks, as many more numbers games pop up within our future. That simple majority just gave the district $8.5 million 2 years ago, whatever new numbers finally look like, and here they come again, hands out before the golden cow. Perhaps the mayor could kick in a few extra bucks from his road maintenance and construction schemes. If it wasn't so real, it would all become a colossal joke played on us. Stupid is as stupid demonstrates over and over again within district and city. I'm ashamed to witness. Support and encourage through investigations. Specifically, an outside third-party financial assessment of district funds is necessary and long overdue. Because as a taxpayer, I for one eventually want my levied, abused, and misappropriated tax dollars to return to me directly with interest and or some positively beneficial results from somewhere. Citizens shall agree, I've no doubt. And again, this is by Ron Doherty of Pocatello. He's an author, specialty magazine contributor, past small business owner, and now retired educator administrator within regular and special learning programs. And you can contact him if you want to at rond, R-O-N-D, at cable1.net. So I guess I'm not the only one that complains about the never-ending levies. Okay, continue on with the election process and with the results. The Wall Street Journal had an interesting article, again on November 6th, by Janet Hook. The Republican Party secured an electoral sweep Tuesday that made it America's dominant party, not just in Washington, but in states around the U.S. On Wednesday, it began trying to define the kind of governing party it wants to be. In the House, Republicans are on track to have the largest majority since at least 1946. The number of governorships held by the GOP grew from 29 to 31, with pickups in the Democratic states of Illinois, Maryland, and Massachusetts. Republicans swept state legislative races across the country, winning control of more than 68 legislative chambers, the largest number since 1920. And Republicans will hold more than 4,000 state legislative seats, the largest number since 1928, according to the Republican State Leadership Committee. The 2010 midterm election delivered 84 new House Republicans to Washington on a Tea Party wave that sought a substantially smaller role for the federal government. The 2014 GOP tide carried in lawmakers who, in some cases, were equally conservative, but who had weaker ties to the Tea Party and expressed a more pragmatic approach to governing. And now I'm really going around the edges of this, because this was the November 6th articles in here on the GOP sets its path. There was so much exciting information in here. Not exciting because it's, oh, my club won or anything like that, because a lot of the Republicans are not my club. But because of the massive change that could come about if these Republicans start acting like Republicans. Now here's one that I really liked, and I shared this with you last week. Johnny Ernst of Iowa. Mrs. Ernst won the state's first competitive Senate race in more than a decade against Democrat Congressman Bruce Braley. She emerged, and it was interesting, if you ever saw Brawley, I guess it is, B-R-A-L-E-Y, it's kind of an unusual spelling. Michelle was out campaigning for Brawley, couldn't pronounce his name. And over again while she was campaigning on television, she kept calling him Bailey. His name's Braley. And here she is talking about how well she knows him, what a great guy he is, and what a great job. She didn't even know who he was, but boy, she's out there on the campaign trail for her boy, Braley. However, Joni Ernst emerged as a breakout star in midterms, besting the 4 Republican primary opponents, and gained national attention with a TV ad that highlighted her experience on an Iowa farm where she castrated hogs. She opposes abortion and co-sponsored a personhood amendment while in the Iowa Senate that would make abortion a federal crime. Mia Love of Utah. Ms. Love narrowly won election to a House seat, becoming the first black Republican woman in Congress. She defeated Democrat Doug Owens by 50% to 47%. She is the former mayor of Saratoga Springs, Utah. Ms. Love is in Haitian descent and a convert to the LDS faith. She gave a rousing speech at the Republican National Convention in Tampa, Florida in September 2012 and was heralded as a rising star. She will represent Utah's 4th district. By the numbers, Democrats lost at least 69 House seats during Obama's tenure. Those lies and fabrications and baloney just have a way of coming back, Mr. Obama. Elise Stefanik, Republican, became the youngest woman elected to Congress at age 30. The Republican won a House seat in New York. Tom Scott, Republican of South Carolina, is the first black senator elected from the South since Reconstruction. He was appointed to the seat in 2013 and won a special election to keep it. And he is a very conservative senator, and man, did he get beat up by his own Republican Party. They wanted to get him out of there, but he beat the system. He's a solid conservative, and we're blessed to have him in there. Florida Republican Rick Scott tallied 2.9 million votes, and Texas Republican Greg Abbott reached 2.8 million. For the first time, 100 women will sit in Congress. The tally for 2015 will be 80 women in the House and 20 in the Senate. A West Virginia University freshman who did most of the campaigning from her dorm room will become the youngest state lawmaker. Syra Blair, a fiscally conservative 18-year-old, will represent a small district in West Virginia's Panhandle. And finally, Hillary Clinton campaigned on behalf of 26 Democrat candidates. Of those, 12 won, 13 lost, and one, Senator Landrieu of Louisiana, is in a runoff. By comparison, Barack Obama attended 8 formal campaign events for candidates, of whom 3 won and 5 lost. So hurrah, hurrah. Well, this is, I guess this is what I've been kind of waiting to get to. I've got a lot to go to, but we're going to be doing some other stuff here. Boy, you know, okay, I'm okay in time. I'm looking at the monitor. It gives me how much time I have left, and it gets a little confusing sometimes between the clocks. Now you've done it. November 9th, 2014 in the Insight column. Now you've done it. And this is by, I guess, a rising star at the paper, Sierra Sivertson, S-I-V-E-R-T-S-O-N, Sivertson, graduate of BYU, Idaho, with a bachelor's degree in English. And folks, you can't see it on there, but I went through her column here, and it looked like I'd been stabbing one of those castrated hogs. It was bleeding with her grammatical and punctuation and her various. For a BYU graduate, she leaves a lot to be desired. I hope she's not going to be teaching. Anyway, now you've done it. And I paraphrase this, now I'm going to pitch a hissy fit because it's all about me. My queen and inspiration, Amy Poehler, as Leslie Knopp once said, I am a goddess, a powerful female warrior, queen of all that I survey. Enemies of fairness and equality, hear my womanly roar. I have no idea who the two persons of Amy Poehler nor that of Leslie Knopp are, but maybe if you're a millennial, you know. Well, citizens and fellow voters, you've proved once again that you are enemies of fairness and equality and educated voting. So you get to hear my womanly roar. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Who are you? Well, aren't you special, and aren't we lucky? I'm disappointed and confused about so many things, so many, in fact, that I have to give you some headlines. Party voting. You guys know you voted for a plagiarist, right? It's common knowledge that Sherry Ibarra plagiarized parts of Janet Jones' campaign website. Oh, but she changed it later, you say. Yeah, only after she got caught. And I know she doesn't know what she just got elected to be. She calls herself chief of schools. Yeah, but I sure hope you know what you've elected her to be. Isn't that a prepositional phrase ending it with be? She's the superintendent of public instruction. Her main job is to advocate for the public instruction of Idaho's children. I went to public school. Oh, okay. I know that cheating is a thing. It's a fact of life. Some students cry every night because algebra is hard, but they want to understand me, she says, and some students cheat off those students and never get punished. A dude bro in my math class. This is written like a high school freshman. I mean, it's that messy. But should we elect someone who represents what the public education system is, or should we elect someone who represents what the public education system can and should be? My quote and my observation is maybe we deserve to be represented by someone who represents what the public education is. I know many of you will say we should elect someone who represents the best of what the schools can offer. Unfortunately, most of you thought we should elect a Republican. Oh, I'm glad that she's not biased. You knew about her plagiarism and you didn't care. And now you know she doesn't know what she's doing, and you still probably don't care because, oh, I just couldn't vote for a Democrat. We know, move along. Subheading, where were the letter writers? Now, where were the letter writers was interesting because she's the one that decides which letters go in the paper, apparently. Every week, I design the opinion section of the journal. That means that every week I read your letters and I place the ones that fit on the page. Oh, the ones that fit. Okay, according to your personal bias or the size of the paper. This is what we might call an aha moment. So you're the one, eh? Okay. Last week, aside from a few columns on the front page, the entire opinion section was made up of your letters about the election. Some made me audibly groan. Yes, I know, we could hear it. Idaho is a red state. There's no question about that. It's redder than Utah. In all my years of being a moderate Mormon, and my question is, what does that mean? What is a moderate Mormon? Does that mean that she's almost Mormon and almost believes the tenets of the faith, or she picks and chooses cafeteria style? What does that mean? Moderate Mormon in Utah, I didn't think I would ever feel more out of place. Glad to be here. But most of your letters left me feeling extremely hopeful. I saw more support for our Democratic candidates than I expected. Our Democrat, oh, there again, I'm glad there's no bias in there. Does our mean she and her friends, the newspaper? Which our are we addressing? I thought for sure the near implosion of Idaho's Republican Party earlier this year left a bad taste in the mouths of voters and people who are going to vote for people, not parties. Your letters let me think that. So, I'm just wondering, where were you on Tuesday? Did you vote, or did you assume because you were going to vote blue in a red state that voting didn't matter? All right. Continuing, next subheading, millennials let me down. Speaking of staying home, where are my millennials at? Where are my millennials at? Is that a prepositional phrase? BYU graduate. Well, I dedicated about 1,000 words to defending you and you stay at home. Is that how you really want to repay me? Me! My boss still talks about those millennials. I'm the millennial at work now. I did that for you. I did that so people would take you seriously as smart, educated, struggling adults. And you stayed home? Did you know notice this is all about her, including the prepositional phrases? All right, next subheading, women, am I right? I would like to thank all of you for reminding women they don't matter. Oh, please. You see, that's what I hear when people consistently vote Republican. When I look at the Republican Party as a whole, I see a bunch of privileged white old men who don't care about women. Oh, does my expert word work both ways? Okay, I take that back. They care about women as long as women are the debate topic and not actual constituents. I know the ACA was designed to provide all Americans with easier access to health care, but the ACA was especially helpful to women, a group of people who spend so much time being legislated and so little time being listened to. Oh, wait, I know. Let's have a feminist pity party. The Affordable Care Act provides women with free access to preventive care, which includes yearly physicals and free access to birth control, which does more than control birth. Yeah, also provides abortifacients that kill babies. So many of you are so opposed to all of this in the name of pro-life that you ignore, disregard, and harm the lives of women who already exist. It's as if their lives don't matter as much as the lives they have the potential to carry. Huh? I'm terrified of what this variety of ways means for me and my defective uterus and the defective uteruses of thousands of women across the country. I'm reading her words, folks. Because the more I learn, the more I realize no one has the perfect baby oven. Everyone is legislating. And again, I say, huh? According to Endometriosis Foundation of America, EFA, approximately 176 million women and girls worldwide suffer from endometriosis, 8.5 million in North America alone. And endometriosis is not the only condition that affects a woman's uterus, not even the most devastating. It is, however, one I think demonstrates the need for preventive care. And it goes on. And, well, you can see the red in here. It's all about me. Well, I thought, okay, maybe somebody in the office will bring it to her attention that it's not all about you. But lo and behold, I read her latest article, and I guess it is all about Sierra Sivertson. Graduated from BYU, Idaho with a bachelor's degree in English. Okay, I don't have a bachelor's degree in English, so all right. A couple other things. In fact, there are a number of other things. I'm going to go around those because I want to end the program with some information. I'm, as you know, I've been sharing this with you every week. I'm doing a lot of study on Islam now and kind of trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So in fact, the latest book I got is the Hadith. This is the sayings, the Hadith of Bukhari, volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4 by Anonymous. And it's anonymous because Bukhari went around gathering anecdotes basically from people around the world and put them together. The Hadith is second in importance in Islam to the Quran. And so I'm going to be studying this a lot because it's interesting. In line with that, I'm going to kind of reintroduce you to some information from a different perspective, but it might give you something to chew on until we meet again. Josh, are we ready to go on that? Okay, this is a history of Islam. It's only about 13 minutes, and we're right down to the wire. So if I miss you, God bless you, and we'll see you next week. Okay, let's see what happens here.
The attack on 9/11 left millions of people wondering, what led to this? What within Muslim ideology would sanction such a seemingly unprovoked attack? Did Osama bin Laden hijack the religion of peace, as some claimed? Was he guilty of promoting radical Islam? Christian apologist Dr. Ravi Zacharias.
Radical Islam, I actually wonder if it's a misnomer. You talk to a moderate, and a moderate will tell you this. A moderate is a very small step away from radicalization. So I don't know, we use it as radical because it is politically correct. The question is the moderate, by his own admission, far away from becoming radical? The question that has to be asked is this: who is interpreting Islam correctly? Bin Laden or the one who criticizes bin Laden? That's the question that needs to be answered.
To understand that question and to understand Islam in general, we have to go back to Muhammad himself.
The entire history of the Islamic faith is based upon an understanding of who Muhammad was and the context out of which he came. Muhammad taught that there is but one true God.
Dr. James White, director of the Phoenix-based Alpha and Omega Ministries, has studied Islam for years and has even defended the Christian faith in official debates with Muslim scholars.
It was the fact that you have this message coming from Muhammad, this message of one true God, and a very clear message that either you follow him and you follow his laws, or the fire will be your abode, that swept away all of the divisions that existed in the peoples in Arabia at that time and united them together. What gave coherence to that message is something called the Quran.
Dr. White points out that the official version of the Quran was collected and collated about half a century after Muhammad's death by a Muslim named Uthman. The Quran contains early and later teachings. Many Muslims believe the later teachings, which speak much of jihad, are of greater value than the earlier teachings, which speak more of peace.
When you're a persecuted minority, you talk about religious freedom and openness. Once you have the religious power, now you're talking about the need to believe everything that the prophet says, not to fight against the prophet.
Thus, there are peace-oriented verses in the Quran, such as Surah or chapter 2, verse 256, which says, "There is no compulsion in religion." But there are also passages advocating violence, such as Surah 9, verse 29, which declares, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah." After the death of Muhammad, Islam spread quickly from the Arabian Peninsula, even all the way into France, until Charles Martel, the grandfather of Charlemagne, defeated a Muslim army at the Battle of Tours in 732. In the Middle East, in North Africa, and in Spain, the Muslims conquered former Christian territory, causing mass conversions to Islam. A lot of the conversions had to do with laying heavy tax burdens on those who would not convert to Islam.
It became far more effective to wipe out those Christian communities by, in essence, taxing them than it did by using the point of the sword. The point of the sword creates martyrs. taxation just creates poor people over time. And it is that long-term type of pressure that creates the most converts.
Robert Spencer, author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, is the director of Jihad Watch.
And this is what happened to the great Christian majorities that had been in Syria, in Egypt, in North Africa. This is what happened to those populations. They now either don't exist at all or they are very tiny minorities because of the wearing down of those communities by the taxes and by the regulations that accompanied it over the centuries.
By AD 950, 50% of what had been Christendom was lost to Islam. For example, all 7 of the churches to whom the book of Revelation was written had all fallen to the crescent. When Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land were denied safe passage in the 11th century, finally, the Christians had had enough and initiated the military campaigns known as the Crusades to take back the Holy Land. Dr. D. James Kennedy, founder of Coral Ridge Ministries, earned his Ph.D. in world religion at New York University.
You virtually never hear anything good about the Crusades, but it's presented from a very biased point of view. For example, people today have been unendingly made aware of the fact that Christians in the Middle Ages made a number of attempts, 8 different crusades, in an attempt to take back the Holy Land from the Muslims who were occupying it. I've asked people this question: who led the Muslim forces that took the Holy Land away from Christians several hundred years before? I've not met anybody that could tell me. I've asked, when did this happen? How did it take place? How much carnage was done? How many thousands of people were killed? How many hundreds upon hundreds of churches were destroyed or desecrated? Nobody knows anything at all about that.
The Crusades were an attempt to defend Christendom. And they were a small and late attempt, after 450 years of unanswered jihadist aggression, they were a late attempt to roll back this onslaught by capturing the Holy Land and making it safe for Christians, and thereby cutting off further Muslim encroachment into Europe, as well as safeguarding the Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land. Ultimately, the Crusades failed. Fact is, however, that Muslim expansion into Europe did stop during the period of the Crusades and only picked up again after the last Crusade. I want to emphasize the Crusaders were not perfect, and they did some things that cannot be excused. At the same time, it is very likely that we owe Western Christian civilization, the civilization that is at the foundation of our own society and culture, to the Crusades, and that we owe the Crusaders a great debt of gratitude for what they did.
A lot of the success of the Muslim conquest of other lands is due to their view of jihad. What exactly is jihad and how does it work? Walid Fares, Middle East scholar and author of Future Jihad.
Jihad is a duty to all Muslims to spread the word of Allah and to spread the mission of Allah around the world, no limitations, till all humans become Muslims, basically.
Jihad can also mean the struggle within, that is, the struggle to submit to Allah, but it more frequently refers to the violent promotion of Islam.
It is undeniable to anyone who reads the Quran and the Hadith, the traditions of Muhammad, and the fiqh, Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence, it's undeniable that jihad has always meant, not exclusively, but unmistakably, warfare against unbelievers in order to establish the hegemony of Islamic law.
Jihad, then, is understood to mean warfare to advance the Islamic cause. Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch points out that part of this is because Islam teaches no sense of assurance of salvation. A Muslim only has one way to be sure of making it to heaven.
The Quran does not promise paradise to anyone, except in one passage, chapter 9, verse 111, promises paradise to those who kill and are killed for Allah. Now this has given rise in the modern age Once the technology has made it possible, it's given rise to suicide bombing and to large-scale suicide attacks like such as what we saw on 9/11, where someone kills and is killed in the process for the sake of Islam.
Part of the whole goal of jihadists is to restore the caliphate.
A caliph is a successor to Muhammad. When Muhammad died, the term caliph comes from khalifa, which means the successor. So the emperors and the popes in Islam are one person. They're called the caliph, and that man would rule the Muslim world and would be as the emperor of the Romans were to the Roman world.
The jihad fighters around the world have said over and over again that one of their core intentions is to restore the caliphate, who would then enforce Islamic law over the Islamic world and then extend the rule of that Islamic law to the rest of the world, to the non-Muslim world. This is why they have said they are fighting, from Indonesia to Western Europe.
Thus, the Islamists or jihadists would even like to take over America one day and replace the Constitution with Sharia or strict Muslim law.
The idea of the Constitution being replaced by Islamic Sharia is something that is central to the goals of the jihad terrorists, as they themselves have told us again and again and again.
And Islam is likely to continue its advance. In Europe, for example, while the Christian church that brought freedom and prosperity is now dying out because of secularization, millions of Muslim immigrants are pouring into those countries, receiving socialistic benefits and reproducing at a far higher rate than Westerners. What the Islamic would-be conquerors of Europe in centuries past could not accomplish seems to be taking place in our time through immigration and procreation.
We will see within our lifetimes a very different Europe than existed historically. And I don't know what that's going to result in, but I do know that for the church, the challenge remains the same, no matter what the political alignments are.
It is said that the majority of Muslims are peace-loving. The question is, what happens to a country, any country, when the majority are Muslims?
The overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world, including in the Middle East and also in the diasporas in the West, are people who are just normal people seeking peace, seeking good life, and seeking also coexistence with others. The problem is that in the hardcore of the interpretation of the Islamic religion, those who are in control of that interpretation are radical jihadists. They are calling on Muslims around the world to get themselves involved in a mission that they are defining.
Our way of life is most certainly at stake. The jihad terrorists are trying to replace our society, our system of government and the way we live. If trends don't change, which they could, then you're going to see Muslim majorities in Holland and in France, possibly in Britain, in Germany, in Italy, before the end of this century, and you're going to see Islamic states there, or civil war to institute such Islamic states, because an energized vanguard of Muslims in those states believes that they must fight in order to institute Islamic law, and that it's their right to have Islamic law in those states as soon as they attain a majority.